1 Corinthians chapter 7. Our passage today is going to be slightly longer than usual. We're going to start in verse 25, and we're going to go all the way to the end of the chapter, verse 40. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 25. Now, concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. But this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep, as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice, as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy, as though they did not possess. And those who use this world as not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. But if any man thinks he is behaving improperly towards his virgin, if she is past the flower of youth, and thus it must be, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin. Let them marry. Nevertheless, he who stands steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and is so determined in his heart that he will keep his virgin, does well. So then he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who does not give her in marriage does better. A wife is bound by law as long as her husband lives. But if her husband dies, she is at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But she is happy if she remains as she is, according to my judgment. And I think I also have the Spirit of God. Did you get all of that? Are you at all confused? Before we go through the text, before we do anything, there's a translational issue that I want to address. Because I think if we get past this, then some of this text will be more understandable. In verses 37 and 38, he speaks of a man keeping his virgin or giving his virgin in marriage. Now, as soon as you read that, as soon as you read the phrase giving a virgin in marriage, you automatically think, oh, we're talking about fathers here giving their virgin daughters in marriage. Problem with that is, you're going through the text, and he's been talking about virgins and thinking about getting married, and young men thinking about getting married, and it seems like out of the blue he starts talking about giving in marriage, even though no father has been mentioned up until this point, no daughter has been mentioned up until this point. Also, it's very strange terminology. In fact, it's unheard of terminology anywhere else in antiquity or in literature to speak of a father and his daughter being called his virgin. That's just not a thing. So what's going on here? There's a problem with the Greek. There's a problem with the word in the Greek in verse 38, where we read, he who gives her in marriage. Now, the word in Greek can be translated gives her in marriage, but it can also be translated marry. Just marry. All right? So, if it just said, so he who marries her, or he who doesn't marry her, we don't even have to go into the whole concept of the father giving his daughter. There's nothing like that here. Simply what he's been talking about married, he's been talking about virgins, he's been talking about men. Should they get married? Should they not get married? And when he's speaking of a man and his virgin, It's most probably speaking of a man and his fiancée, his virgin. They're not married yet, but it's his virgin. And so the entire passage becomes far more understandable if we see that this is talking about men and their fiancés and whether they should go ahead and get married or not get married. Okay? So, keeping that in mind, what's the main issue in 1 Corinthians chapter 7? What's the context? We've been here for a few weeks. There are some in Corinth who have been teaching that it is holier and more spiritual to be celibate, to be single, because it's worldly, apparently, to get married and have physical relations and so forth. These are the kind of people that we would call ascetics. Asketiki. An ascetic is a person who thinks that in order to be holy and spiritual, you have to abstain from the things of the world, from the pleasures of the world. Don't eat. We're going to fast, and don't eat certain things, and don't drink certain things, and definitely can't have fun. You can't listen to music. You can't, and obviously you can't get married because that would introduce physical pleasure, and we can't have that. Those are all worldly things, and we need to be spiritual. This is what an ascetic is, and this is what it seems like you had in Corinth. There's some people who are saying don't get married. You got to be single because that's more spiritual. Now Paul is dead against ascetics. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 4. That's not 1 Corinthians, excuse me. 1 Timothy chapter 4. And he is dead against it. He speaks about people who are forbidding you to eat certain foods or get married, and he calls those doctrines of devils. All right? Calls them heretics. Don't listen to those people. He is not an ascetic. Early on in the chapter, he's talking, there are people who are thinking, well, I'm already married, so what do? Maybe I just don't touch my wife. And Paul is like, no abstinence within marriage. Then there's people who are thinking, well, I'm already married, what should I do? Maybe I should divorce my wife. And Paul is like, no, don't divorce your wife. Then there are others who are thinking, yeah, but I'm married to an unbeliever, so it would probably be better if I was single. And Paul is like, no, even if you're married to an unbeliever, don't divorce. No. And then he gave a principle that we looked at last week, which was, doesn't matter whether you're married or unmarried, that's not the issue. That's not what we're concerned about. The concern is, are you obeying God wherever you are? If you're married, follow God, obey God. If you're single, follow God, obey God. You don't have to be the one or the other. So this entire chapter has been, if you're married, just stay married. If you're single, just stay single. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine the way that it is. But now, we meet another category of people. Think about it. You're engaged. And you're like, excuse me, Paul, you just said, if you're married, stay married. If you're single, stay single. What are we supposed to do now? We're kind of in between here. We're kind of in transition. I've kind of made a promise that I'm going to marry her, or we're engaged. What are we going to do? Should we go ahead and get married, or should we just break it off and be single? What should we do? Now, this is a difficult issue for Paul. It's a slightly difficult issue for Paul for a couple of reasons. I'm going to explain why. First of all, Paul is single. Okay? And he likes being single. He enjoys being single. He doesn't need to get married. He doesn't need that physical relationship. He's like, I'm fine the way that I am. And so he wants to encourage people that it's fine if you're single. It's good if you're single. There's nothing wrong with being single, because some people think that you don't have to be married. It's okay. So he wants to encourage people to be single, but at the same time he wants them to understand that there's nothing wrong with being married either. Okay? So he's trying to hold this balance the whole time. Whenever he says it's good to be single, he automatically goes back and says, but it's good to be married too. It's fine. Both are fine. And especially if you don't have the gift of celibacy, as he did. He already talked about this earlier in the chapter. He said, I would like it if everyone was like me, but I understand I have my own gift, you have your own gifts. This is not for everyone. It's better to marry than to burn, so just get married. If you need to get married, get married. So he wants to encourage people who are thinking about singleness that it's fine. You don't have to get married. But the second reason he's having difficulty here is because even though try and follow me here. This is going to be the most difficult part. Even though he likes singleness, he likes it for completely different reasons than the ascetics in Corinth. Okay? The people in Corinth are saying it is inherently more spiritual to be single. And Paul's like, no, that's not the point at all. The point is that there are practical benefits. When you're trying to serve the Lord, there are practical benefits to being single. There are certain things that you can do when you're single that you can't when you're married. So he is for it, but he wants to make sure he doesn't think that he's agreeing with these people. He's trying to navigate through all kinds of difficulties here to try and explain his point. You'll see. But I'll make it as simple as I can. As simple as I can, and it'll be fine. Verse 25. Let's start going through the text. Verse 25. He says, now, concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. All right? Concerning virgins, should they marry? Should they not marry? There is no commandment from the Lord. There is no commandment to marry or not to marry. It's not like you all got to get married or you all got to stay single. There is no commandment here, okay? But I'm going to give you my judgment, he says. I'm going to give you some advice. I'm going to give you some counsel now, all right? And keep in mind, he points this out, this is good counsel. This is good advice, all right? Not all advice is equal. If you're not sure what to do about a certain situation and you have a mature Christian who's been a Christian for 50 years and you got a 20-year-old atheist on the other hand, what they're going to tell you is going to be very different, and maybe you should lean this way. So he's going to give us some good advice now, some good apostolic. This is not law. This is not, you got to do this. He's like, it can go both ways, but let me give you some advice now. And my advice is trustworthy. By the mercy of God, my advice is trustworthy. And he's going to point that out again right at the end of the passage in verse 40 where he says, I think I also have the Spirit of God. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, so what he's going to do now, he's going to give us a number of reasons why it would be beneficial to remain single, even though there's nothing wrong with being married. Okay? And let me just say, this needs to be heard, especially in evangelical churches, because there are other churches like Roman Catholic churches or Greek Orthodox churches where they've kind of fallen into the same error that the ascetics here had, who are thinking that it's holier to be single. And so we as evangelicals, we kind of take the other side and we're like, what are they crazy talking about? No, it's fine to be married. Marriage is good. And we kind of think that is how it should be. I know a lot of Christians who, if they look at someone who is single, they're thinking, what's wrong with him? Why is he single? Why? We need to get this person married. And it's like, not necessarily. Maybe it's fine that they're single. There's nothing wrong with being single. All right? So he's going to give us a bunch of reasons why it would be beneficial to remain single. There's nothing weird about it. Paul was single. Jesus was single. John the Baptist was single. All right? It's not for everyone. If you don't have a gift to do it, then don't do it. But it is for some. So first reason to remain single is, verse 26, what he calls this present distress. Verse 26. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Question, what is the present distress? Well, there's two options. Number one option is that there was some kind of crisis in Corinth that we don't know about and we can just speculate. Something really bad going on. I don't know. We don't know. Second option, though, could be something that the New Testament especially talks about a lot, is the trouble that a Christian will have in this world because he is a Christian. Not just any kind of trouble that anyone has. because he is a Christian. Jesus in John 15 said, you are not of this world. That's why the world hates you. If you were of the world would love its own, but you don't belong to this world, so the world hates you. Look, he says, they hate me and they're going to kill me. What do you think they're going to do with you? The Apostle Paul in Acts 14, he's speaking to the churches, to a number of churches in modern-day Turkey, and he says to them, through many tribulations, we must enter the kingdom of God. And you may be thinking, because of where we live today, you may be thinking, oh, what tribulations, what distresses, we're fine. We're Christians and we're fine. Well, ask people who live in Muslim countries. Ask people who have to hide, who can't meet the way that we're meeting right now. There are people today who are being tortured or killed because of their faith. They are going through great distresses. They know what we're talking about. And this is how it was in the first century. Christianity was an illegal religion. Look at what Paul went through. Everywhere. You go in one city, beaten up. Move to the next city, thrown into jail. Go to the next city, stoned. He got stoned one time and survived. Everywhere he goes, there is trouble. And there was trouble for the Christians. And so you may say to me, well, Nico, what's your point here? Well, the point is, he's saying, maybe you don't need to get married. And let me tell you why. Because, well, imagine if Paul had a wife and kids back home. There's a whole other issue. There's a whole other issues now that he would have to deal with. He can't just go and, if they stone me, who cares? There's a lot of stuff going on if you have a wife and kids. Let me give you an example. In the Old Testament, book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a prophet who was prophesying that the Babylonians would come and destroy the nation if the nation did not repent. And God speaks to Jeremiah and he says to him, don't get married. Jeremiah was a young man. Why? Why shouldn't I get married? Is it because it's so much holier to be single? No. Don't get married, because if you get married, you're going to see your wife and kids either killed or taken into exile by the Babylonians. That's what's going to happen. So maybe it would be better to remain single, considering the distress that exists, the crisis that exists. And that's what Paul is saying here. I don't know if it was something specific in Corinth or in general distresses that Christians were having in the first century, but he's saying, if the circumstances are bad, maybe it's better to remain single. Second reason why singleness could be good is because if you're married, there will be trouble in the flesh, he says, namely sin. Look at verse 27. Are you bound to a wife or a woman? That would be a better translation. Are you bound to a woman? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a woman? Do not seek a woman. This probably not wife because it's, keeping people who are engaged here in mind. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned, making sure. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. Verse 27, he's repeating the same thing that he's been saying in the whole chapter. Just stay the way you are. If you're single, just stay single. If you're married, stay married. It's fine. But he wants to make sure that it's not a sin if you get married. He says it's not a sin if you get married. And I don't think he is saying this in the sense of, well, it's not great, but what can you do if that's your only option? It's fine. It's not a sin. No, I think the people in Corinth, there were some in Corinth who were saying, don't get married. To the people who are engaged, and they're saying, don't get married. It's a sin. And Paul's saying it's not a sin. You can get married. But there will be trouble in the flesh. Why trouble in the flesh? What problems could we possibly have? Marriage. Let me tell you what marriage is. Marriage is the joining together of two sinners. That's what it is. And wait a little bit longer and there's a bunch of other little sinners running around too. All right? That's what you get. Okay? And look, I'm not against marriage. I'm not against marriage. Paul is not against marriage. You go to Ephesians, Paul speaks about marriage in glorious terms. Okay? We're not against marriage. Just facts. Just facts. Fact of the matter is, every person has their problems. Every person has their sins. And once you get married, now all their problems and all their sins, they're just kind of added on top with you, and now you got to deal with a bunch more. Just how it is. So Paul says, it's not a bad idea. You could consider singleness. It's fine. Now, not if you don't have the gift of singleness. Because if you don't, we don't want you burning with lust and having all kinds of other issues. All right? But if you can, if it's good, you could be single. It's fine. You don't have to get married. Third reason to consider remaining single. And in case you were thinking, none of this lesson applies to me. I'm married, or this will apply to everyone here. Reasons to consider remaining single is because, he says, the form of this world is passing away. Listen to this, verse 29. But this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. And those who use this world as not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. One of the reasons you could consider being single is because this world is temporary. This life is not going to go on indefinitely. Every day that passes. I know we always make fun of those crazy people who give us dates about when Christ is going to come back.
October.
Is it October now? Okay, there's always one date. We didn't get the September 23rd one. Now there's going to be a new one in October. But what is true is that every day that goes by, we're getting one day closer to Christ coming back. And you may say to me, so what are you saying, Nico? You're just saying, well, Christ is going to come back at some point, so just do nothing. Just sit there and don't get married, don't buy, just do nothing. No, that's not what we're saying. But we need to understand that all the things that we have in this life, even good gifts, even things like marriage, are temporary. We need to live our lives with eternity in mind. When you buy something, realize you're not going to have that forever. It's just for now. When you use the things of this world, realize that's not going to be forever. These things are all going to pass away and be burnt up. If you are weeping, it's not going to be forever. When Christ comes back, he's going to wipe away all the tears from your eyes. If you're rejoicing, yay, something great happened. Yeah, okay, good, but all this is going to pass away, and let me tell you, when Christ comes back, it's going to be way better than whatever joy you thought you had now. And even marriage, yes, is not forever. I know it doesn't sound very romantic, but it's a matter of fact. Jesus was talking about this with the Sadducees in Matthew 22, and he says, in the resurrection, once Christ comes back, once we have the eternal state and we're resurrected, there's not going to be marriage. You're not going to be married. Marriage ends at death, or when Christ comes back, in this case. That's it. It's temporary. It's for now. All these things belong to this present age. And the point that Paul is making is not, well, never buy anything. Never own anything. He's not saying, well, you can just mistreat your wife because who cares? She's not going to be your wife forever. That's not his point. But the point is, even the best things in life, even marriage, and even if you have a great marriage, and even that is not eternal. That cannot be your number one priority in life. Your number one priority in life is Christ and following him in whatever state you are in. Whether you're married or unmarried, doesn't matter. Following Christ is your number one priority. That is what will matter eternally. So Paul is saying, you don't have to get married. There's nothing wrong with marriage. But marriage is temporary. Follow Christ. That's what's important. Fourth reason to remain single, it'll just be easier to serve the Lord without anxiety. Verse 32. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. I have to say this first in case it sounds like I'm bashing marriage. There are many blessings to being married. The love that you can have with your spouse, there's protection, there is provision, there is help. There are many blessings within marriage. But there are also a lot of anxieties and distractions. It's not often, but on rare occasions, Stavula will go with the kids and stay out in Anavisa with my parents. And I'll be at home by myself for a couple of days. I am amazed at how much work I can get done in those 2 days. Okay? I'm just giving you some facts now. All right? I don't have little kids running in and interrupting me every whenever. There's no, it's lunchtime. I have to stop everything that I'm doing because we're eating right now. I can just work as long as I want. I can eat whenever I want. It's fine. Now, I'm not saying that in the sense of, oh, so much better to be single. I'm not saying that at all. I like being married. I love being married. I want to be married. But just facts. When you are single, you don't have as many distractions. You have more time. You just do. You have less anxieties when you're single. And once you're married and you have kids, time is different. And let me have a quick side note here. Quick side note. To anyone who is single and may be saying, ooh, yeah, this is great. Paul is saying, more time to myself so that I'm not distracted and I don't have the burden of a wife and kids and, it's great. No, Paul is not saying, if you're single, he's not giving us reasons why you can be single for your own benefit. Single so that I can not have distractions and so that I can please myself. So I can just wake up whenever I want. And I can go to bed whenever I want. And I can go out whenever I want. And I don't have any obligations. And I don't have any responsibilities. That's not what he is saying. The point is not, it would be good to be single so that you can do whatever you want for yourself. The point is, you could be single and you could have so much more time to serve the Lord without distractions. Okay? This is not about serving yourself. It's about serving the Lord. All right? If you're just trying to use this so that you can do whatever you want, that's not what Paul intends. Right? So, Paul has given us all these reasons why it would be good to be single. Now again, this is not law. This is not a commandment. This is good advice that he has given us. And look at what he says in verse 36. But if any man thinks he is behaving improperly towards his virgin, I think that's talking about his fiancée, if she is past the flower of youth, and thus it must be, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin. Let them marry. He says, if you're engaged, and you got the girl, don't just string her along and just leave it and we'll see. No, look, if you wish to get married, get married. It's fine. Just do it. Get married. But, verse 37, nevertheless, he who stands steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and is so determined in his heart that he will keep his virgin, does well. Now when it says he will keep his virgin, I think it means that he will keep her a virgin, that he will leave her a virgin, that he's not going to marry her. Because in the previous verse he said, if you want to marry her, do it. Now he's saying, but if you don't have to. And he gives a million qualifications here, all right? He gives a million qualifications here. He's like, if you're steadfast in your heart, okay, if you're sure about this, having no necessity, there's no compulsion, no one is making you do this, all right? And you're doing this by your own will. You have the power of your own will. You have so determined. You're deciding, no one's making you do this, no one is guilting you into doing this. If you are ready to be single, if you're okay with it, no one is making you do it. Don't let these people guilt you into doing it. But if you're okay with it and you're able to do it, don't marry her. It's fine. You can either marry her if that's what you've determined to do, but if not, leave her. It's fine. You don't have to get married. Verse 38, so then, he who marries her, I think would be a better translation, does well. But he who does not marry her does better. Now, keep in mind, whenever he says this does better, first of all, he has said only if you have the gift of celibacy. Second of all, he has talked about the present distress that exists. There are a number of qualifications here. And second of all, he is not saying it's better in that it is more spiritual of you. It is better in that there are practical benefits to being single. There are. But there's nothing wrong with being married. So verse 39, a wife is bound by law as long as her husband lives, but if her husband dies, she is at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But she is happy if she remains as she is, according to my judgment, and I think I also have the Spirit of God. Paul has been addressing the men, whether they should marry or not, and now he addresses the women really quick, reminding them that if you're not sure, should I get married, should I not get married, what should I do? In case you're thinking, oh, just get married, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. He's like, no. If you get married, it's for life. Letting you know. It's till death separates you. Okay? If your spouse dies, then you can marry someone else. That's fine. But if not, you're married. And if you do end up marrying someone else afterwards, he says it must be only in the Lord. I'm amazed at people who think that the Bible doesn't say anything about that you have to marry a believer. What do you think this verse means? Some people will say, well, it doesn't say he must be a believer. What does it mean? Okay? Marry someone in the Lord. All right? If you're going to get married, make sure he's a Christian. A Christian marrying an unbeliever is a big mistake. And Paul closes again with his whole thing. If you want to get married, that's fine. You can marry whoever you want as long as he's a Christian. But I kind of like singleness myself, he says. I think you'll be happier that way. That's my judgment. But again, this is under the right circumstances. You can marry or you don't have to. So what's the lesson of the entire chapter? Just to sum up. What's the point? And what do we care? Whether married, single, what is this? What does it matter? The point of the passage, of the chapter as a whole, is not, well, you have to be married or you have to be single. The point is, you need to serve the Lord. That's what matters. In whatever state you are in. And when you make big decisions in life, like marriage, or any other big decisions in life that you may make, here's what you need to think. Is it beneficial in my service to the Lord? When I make a decision, when I have to make a choice, what is going to benefit my work, my walk with the Lord? That's what I need to be concerned about. It's not about, oh, should I be this, should I be that? No. Follow the Lord. What is best in following the Lord? Thank you for your attention.